Yeah, no, I live in Los Angeles, and about a couple weeks into the lockdown for the coronavirus, there, I took off and came up here to Southern Oregon to be with the extended family, and then so I was here for a good month or so. Then I went back home for a bit. Literally left LA the day before George Floyd was killed, and then I just stayed up here because it's relatively quiet up here. There's not much going on, so I'm kind of in a bit of a dilemma because I feel a little bit guilty to have the opportunity to escape like this, but also I've been able to see things from a different perspective. You know, from 35,000 feet, where I'm actually away um, from I think a lot of the emotion and personal emotion from people that I know, you know, that are involved in protests, or people that I know that are in law enforcement. So I've been able to kind of take a step back from that, and I still communicating with them, but not really being on the ground is actually giving me a different perspective that I am somewhat grateful for. But I'm talking to you from a barn in Oregon right now. So
Picturesque surroundings. Uh,
yeah,
this is obviously not the first time that the death of an unarmed black person by a white police officer has taken over the news cycle in the U.S. But is it fair to say, and would you agree with the fact that this one feels different?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the reaction, you know, and it's been building over several years now. But I think because of the coronavirus, you know, because we're once again in an election year, you know, that we've got oh, about 5 months until, you know, we're electing the next president, and it's either going to be 4 more years with Donald Trump, or potentially Joe Biden, unless some crazy reason in the next 5 months somebody comes out of nowhere. That honestly, in my heart of hearts, I'd love to see um, a younger person, maybe a person of color, maybe someone that served in the military. Not me. I don't want to do it at all. But like, obviously, I'm not a person of color either. But someone like that you know comes forward and maybe isn't even a part of the parties. That might inspire me. You know, someone that's really got the voice of the young people. So anyway, I think the mix of all those things is why it's so different. Um, but also it was like that video was so clear, you know, when you see, and not that some of the other ones weren't, but this one was just another level of like, you literally see him die under that man's knee. And I think the irony too of it being this officer taking a knee and ending the life of somebody versus, you know, almost 4 years ago, Colin Kaepernick taking a knee in protest, all those things I think led to this moment, and why the reaction is so much bigger and different than before.
I mean, we've seen on the news stations the imagery of the, I guess, the police reaction and quite heavy-handed tactics used by some police officers, even in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. That at some of these protests, some of them, a lot of them, peaceful protests, that there's quite heavy-handed tactics used by police officers, and maybe some of the rhetoric used by Donald Trump doesn't help that. But have you been in conversation with friends? Obviously, you're out in Oregon at the moment, so you might have seen it firsthand. But have you been in touch with friends or family that have kind of seen this police brutality at firsthand?
Yeah, not as much. I've been in touch with people more that have been involved in some pretty peaceful stuff and haven't really seen that reaction. So obviously, the news is really good at finding those moments, being on the scene in those moments, and you don't get to see a lot of the good stuff happening, the peaceful stuff. I mean, we've seen through some outlets and some other, you know, social media, you see so many of the police officers and um, people that are protesting embracing one another and walking together and having conversations and doing some really great stuff. But yes, you are also seeing some just, you know, the clear representation of what needs to change, you know, tactics wise, but also just communication wise and reaction wise. You know, I mean, we can't have we can't have people, you know, wearing that uniform that are on such an edge and have such a quick trigger. And I don't just mean shooting bullets, but to anger, you know, a quick anger trigger. And I understand feeling scared. I understand feeling threatened. You know, if you're wearing a uniform, I've been overseas, I've been at war, I've felt those things. But you've got to rise above that. You took you volunteered to patrol the streets, to protect and serve, and you've got to handle it in a different way. Uh, we really got to change the mindset, that a lot of these officers have, and it's not the majority at all. I don't ever want to pretend that it's that way, or make people think it's like that, but it doesn't matter. If it's happening at all, it needs to be fixed.
We've got Lamar Louis here. Lamar, I hope you can hear me okay. Can you hear me? You're welcome to
Yes,
the
I
call
can
as
hear you
well.
now. I can hear
How are
you
you?
now. Sorry for my tardiness.
No, you're fine. Not a problem. Lamar, where are you at the moment? You're located in New Orleans, is it?
Not right now. Right now, I'm actually in Florida with my wife. She's from Florida.
So, just to introduce the guests again, so we have Nate Boyer here, who's, as I mentioned, a former United States Green Beret. Tours, as you mentioned, Nate, as well, in Iraq and Afghanistan. And Lamar Louis. Lamar, you've been, a former teammate, quite crucially, of Drew Brees. And, you've served on different NFL franchise locker rooms. You've been with the Cowboys, the Arizona Cardinals, the Baltimore Ravens, and indeed the New Orleans Saints. So, what's your reaction been to this tragic killing of George Floyd and the reaction where you are?
Right. It's been disheartening, man. It's been sad. It's been hurtful. My personal reaction, as a black man, it hits home. Just a lot of anger, man. A lot of rage, and it's just a lot of sadness for the most part.
This is probably a fairly loaded question, but what has it been like? I think from doing my research, I think we're pretty much the same age, but I'm a white person living in Ireland. What has it been like growing up as a black person in America?
Well, looking back at the way I was brought up, now being older, it's really sad. You really don't understand what's going on as your upbringing is taking place. But when I look back at it, man, I was always taught that I had to be 10 to 3 times better at whatever I'm doing than the white man, just to get an equal chance or equal shot at whatever I'm doing. Like, I have to be better. Like, we cannot be the same, because let's say if the playing field isn't equal. So if we were, equal at whatever we were doing, we would always lose to the majority. I've been called, the N-word a lot. I've seen it in sports, especially. My first love was baseball. So I've seen it for travel teams. I've broke records and different things like that for like Little League baseball. It seems like people would try their best to make sure that I wasn't on those all-star teams, man. I mean, it's really ridiculous at how young racism starts to impact you. I mean, especially growing up in the South, in Louisiana. You see it every day, and I'm from a small country town, so that doesn't make it any better.
Ned, we mentioned at the start, you mentioned the irony of the fact that George Floyd was killed by a police officer taking a knee. And you mentioned Colin Kaepernick, someone who took that very protest of taking a knee during the national anthem back in 2016. I think he first started it. But tell people who maybe don't understand how that taking a knee came around, because it came around after a meeting between Colin Kaepernick and yourself.
Yeah, so 2016, like I said earlier, it was an election year, and the Black Lives Matter movement had gained quite a bit of momentum, and there were some people that were, I think, starting to kind of listen and take notice, but there was still a pretty, I would say, majority of people saw it as maybe a violent movement or a divisive movement, or they didn't understand the movement, but they just thought, you see images of fists in the air and, a person with dark skin that looks like someone we would classify as being militant or something like that. And you make decisions, you make assumptions, you make stereotypes about what it's about. You know what I mean? And you're like, and there's a lot of people, including myself, man, who have, instilled in our heads that's like, hey, look, civil rights movement happened. It's fair now. It's equal now. There's no segregation. Like, what's the big deal? And it's something, over the last 4 years, how much I've had to learn and grow through that is pretty crazy. But for me personally, just seeing that in 2016 and then seeing Colin Kaepernick, somebody who, I spent 5 minutes in the league, but after my time overseas in the Darfur, in the midst of a genocide of 400,000 people in Sudan, and then going to Iraq, going to Afghanistan, and seeing people and being around people that are dealing with a level of oppression, but also dealing with people that make assumptions about the military, why we're going over there, we're all over there, just killing people and doing this and that. And it's like, they don't know the reality of what we're trying to do there for those people, right? And I know that because I'm in those shoes. So then Colin starts protesting, starts sitting on the bench and protest. And at first I'm upset, I'm hurt. All I see is like this image of somebody sitting down when the national anthem's played. And I think, okay, unpatriotic, doesn't care about America, doesn't like America, whatever. I make all these judgments. And I had to stop myself because I was seeing, we were already getting pretty divided as a country at the time, but just seeing the amount of rage that was being displayed, people were vocalizing that, and the word disrespect getting thrown around like crazy, and the word, anti-American or whatever you want to call it. So I wrote this open letter to Colin just saying, hey, look, these are my experiences. This is why I feel the way I feel. But I got to be honest, it's unfair to me to assume I should know what it's like to be you, or what you're going through, what your experiences are like, and why you feel the way you feel. So that's not right of me. At the end of the day, I fought for, I took the oath to defend the Constitution, which includes the First Amendment and the right to free speech and free expression. And so essentially I fought for your right to do what you're doing, and I got to respect that. And the letter went kind of viral. Colin ended up calling me, and we met down in San Diego before the final preseason game that year against the Chargers. And this is a year after I was in the league, and I only got to play in the preseason. So it was ironic in that sense. The one game I played in, I'm standing on the sideline when the national anthem's playing, and I burst into tears because of the pride that I felt. But that pride, those emotions were all based on my experiences, my relationship to the flag, to the anthem, to America. Different relationship for someone like Colin Kaepernick and millions of other people. And so we sat down in the lobby of the team hotel on game day, which is pretty crazy. People don't really do that usually. You're pretty focused on the game. And it was like 4 hours before kickoff, and we just started talking about stuff. And by the end of the conversation, we had so much in common, and it was nice for both of us, I think, to realize and recognize that, like, we want the same things basically. And his intent was not disrespect for the military, disrespect for the flag, the narrative that the media had kind of ran with. And I totally understood that. And so he asked me at the end, do you think there's another way I could protest or demonstrate that wouldn't offend people in the military? And I said, man, no matter what you do, you're going to offend some people. That's just the way it is. And, you've committed to not standing. So from my perspective, and I don't speak for anybody in the military, I speak for myself, but I think being alongside your teammates would be a good adjustment if you're willing to do that. And taking a knee, I think looks more proactive. I've never seen that as a disrespectful act. People take a knee to pray and to propose to their wives. And in the military, it's common for us to take a knee at Arlington, in front of a fallen brother's grave to pay respect. So I said, I think that would be a good option if you're looking to do something else. And if you do that, I'll stand next to you, man. And he did. So that night he took a knee at that game, and it was crazy to hear the boos in the stands. That was what bothered me the most. Nothing about his protest really bothered me, especially after talking to him. But it was just the reaction of people, and there's just a lot of hate in the country, and it's interesting though to see now. And we talked about it for a minute before Louis got on, Lamar got on, but there's a lot of people that have changed that tune. A lot of people in the media too, and I'm not going to call them out because it doesn't matter to me. It's just the fact that like it's the same people that were talking to me, interviewing me 3.5 years ago that were like pretty skeptical about it or pretty one way about it are now kind of like they've shifted. They've come more to this moderation, and this understanding of like, all right, I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to, I don't even have to fully relate, but I have to respect and understand that like there was nothing ever violent about that. And at the end of the day, Colin wants what's best for our country, wants us to get better. And everybody can agree, especially when you're able to see. That's the power of social media. You see all this bad stuff and evil stuff, but we also see, well, it's an evil thing that we saw with Officer Chauvin. But if we didn't see that, if people didn't get to see that, and how George's life was taken from him, if people don't get to see that, like what happens next is not there. We don't have the movement that's happening now, and people really opening their eyes more and more. So sorry, I'm kind of rambling on there, but. No, that's essentially the story there.
Yeah, great insight into how that all came about. But I guess the movement you mentioned, and Lamar, just to get your thoughts on this. I mean, the reaction from the sporting world. A lot of people have come out and given their 2 cents and spoken of their horror at this. Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, and one person that was interviewed afterwards and gave his own thoughts was Drew Brees. And there's been a lot of controversy about Brees' comments. He spoke about, having reverence and respect for the flag and for his, ancestors and relatives who fought in the military. But you put out a tweet that got a lot of traction online about the fact that, you would have shared locker rooms with Drew Brees when you were with the New Orleans Saints. So what was your original reaction when you saw Drew Brees' comments?
My original reaction was just hurt, man. It's like, wow, bro, like you had an opportunity to, you had a second opportunity to bring people together, bro, and you blew it, and it's just basically like doubling down on crucifying Cap and what he stood for. That's how I took it. You have relationships with so many people of color, and I don't disregard the good service he's done in the past, but 5 things done well don't discount the current issue or the current wrong you currently did, and that's what people fail to see. I think Nate hit it right on the nail, man. I mean, how can I say this? With Drew, bro, you have a responsibility as a leader, an unseen responsibility that a lot of, I guess, athletes don't like to take up, but you have that, bro. And I don't think he did the best job right there. Yes, I know he came out and apologized, but there's gonna be some healing there, man. I mean, it's almost as if someone truly says something, and he really said, and it's just the way he said it, because no one was talking about the flag, no one was talking, but he decided to bring that up, So there's a lot of angry people. I'm not angry, at that in that situation, but it was very hurtful.
One point.
I'm gonna step in here real quick. You don't mind?
Yeah, far away.
Lamar, what I noticed that frustrated me was, as you said, like Drew's a great dude, and he's done a lot in the community.
Right.
And I know he's helped secure voting rights for formerly incarcerated people in Louisiana. Like he helped with that movement with the Saints. But at the same time, like, and I feel all the emotions he was talking about when the anthems played and the flag raised, I feel those exact same things. So I totally relate to that. But like what he failed to just acknowledge was that all he had to say, in my opinion, all he had to say was, but that's how I feel, and that's my experience. And I can't pretend to feel or expect everybody to just feel that because I do. Like that's where it just missed. It would have been so simple.
That's exactly where it was, man. A lot of the negative comments that I seen were basically that, you can't force him to feel this way. You can't force this upon him. And I'm like, I understand that, but at the same token, just as you said, I mean, that's his experience. You know, that was your experience. You know, and I'm not discrediting that experience at all.
Right.
You know, just like in life, there are some experiences that I've had, some great experiences that I have. You might have not had the same experience with whatever that situation or event is. Um, but I just think it's just basically the insensitivity, the just not really recognizing that how sensitive the topic is. I have a lot of hurt people out there. So it could have been a number of different things. But
And it just took away from the narrative too, because the narrative is not about.
Right.
The narrative's not we're
Right.
protesting. Colin Kaepernick, even Colin, he wasn't protesting the anthem or protesting the flag. He wasn't asking us to change the American flag to something else, or you know, whatever. He was saying he was using that platform because you know, he doesn't feel that those symbols are holding up to the promise, you know, of what America is supposed to be. And it's always been about, from his mouth and many others, police brutality, social inequality and social injustice and racial inequality, you know. And so like, that's the narrative, and that needs to maintain. And the media has done such a good job of twisting that narrative and pulling it away and making it about gestures and, you know, whether who's taking a knee this week, you know, in the NFL, like that's what it's all about. And it's like
there's a lot of things right now,
and
man,
it just fed into that, and that's what frustrated me too. It just was like, dude, come on, bro. Especially not right now with everything happening.
Right. I mean, if I
television,
go ahead.
Just sorry to interrupt, but I mean, Shannon Sharp had said he was quite angry, and you know, he was even calling for Drew Brees just retire, and he said things like, you know, Drew would have been playing with black players from Pee Wee right through to the NFL. So here's a guy who has been around African Americans his entire life, and this is his attitude toward it. So it would make you wonder about the attitude of some people who haven't been around African Americans for quite as long. So is that a fair assessment, that maybe it's a bit worrying that someone who's been around black people his entire life has these views?
Well, I don't agree with that fully. I agree with a lot of Shannon's points, but that one I think isn't too fair. Because you can be around black people your whole life. I mean, and not understand them. Just as someone who's never been around black people, yes, you should understand a little more, and have a little bit more empathy, because some of those people you with are your brothers. You know, people you love and understand to a certain extent. But you know, I've had plenty of people that I've played sports with, plenty Caucasians that I've played sports with my whole life, that still to this day don't understand me. They know I'm a good person, you know. They're comfortable around me, but that's pretty much where it stops, where the line stops. They really don't know and understand me when we're talking about these issues. Now, when you sit me down and we talk about the issues that's going on, that dialogue is so important, man. Just last night, and this is why I was late, I stayed up and talked to a few guys until 6 a.m, man. Before we talked, you would have looked at us as enemies. But when we got off the phone, man, we were so understanding. They understood my struggles, I understood their struggles. And it was like, okay, how can we help to get more people to understand and have these dialogues? So I would say being around black people isn't enough to actually understand, especially when you're talking about these current issues. So I can't say I agree with Shannon on that point.
I think we've just lost Nate, but I might just continue the conversation with yourself, Lamar.
Okay.
I mean, I noticed one of the things on your, you had tweeted, and look, I hate to bring politics into sport, as we all do, but I guess with this killing of George Floyd, it is extremely political. You know, when we've had the comments from President Trump, and I think you mentioned in one of your tweets that a lot of the people getting back to you and sending hate your direction had one thing in common, and that was "Make America Great Again" in their Twitter bios. So if you could speak to President Trump directly right now, what would you say to him?
That's tough, man. That's a really tough question, interesting question, because I believe he's the king of not listening, not not trying to understand. So I would honestly feel helpless and in my words, but if I felt that he was actually listening, and trying to understand, um, I would tell him, look, man, as Black people, we love America too, man. Like, we all love America. We recognize that America is the greatest country in the world. We recognize that. I mean, we recognize how powerful the power America holds. We recognize the liberties that we have by being in America. We recognize that in some other countries, they don't have the right to vote. In some other countries, there's dictatorships. In some other countries, it's a lot worse than America. So I'm grateful to be in America, but this is not. This is on a global scale. What we're talking about now, we're talking about, okay, how can we make America better? Like, what are the things that are going wrong in America? You know,
I mean,
and that's for the most part, that's it, man. I'll just ask for him to sit down and listen and actually try to understand.
you had said at the end of your post, silence is murder in this.
Hmm.
Has the reaction surprised you? As even people like Roger Goodell in the NFL coming
Hmm.
out with things like, we recognize the power of our platform in communities and as part of the fabric of American society, and yet Colin Kaepernick has been without a job since I think 2017 because
Right.
of expressing his views. So, what do you make of that hypocrisy? In some ways, is that has the reaction been what you expect and would have wanted?
It's exactly what you said, hypocrisy. And I think it goes back to what Nate said. It's people. Um, I think I take it as mocking the cause, mocking what we're fighting for. Because now that's another headline. NFL are hypocrites, or they pose to want to help, yet Kaepernick is without a job and whatever. Um, nah, it's exactly what you said. It's hypocrisy. Um, they've dropped that ball many moons ago, so we know where the NFL stands. We know where the owner stands. I mean, they show us this just in the collective bargaining agreements. And this isn't even that's not even a Black issue. That's a player issue, which the majority of the players are Black. But that's that's another story. But no, I don't buy it. I don't buy the blackout or anything of that nature from the NFL.
I mean, I know we've obviously been here before. We had the killing of Eric Garner in 2014, and the famous phrase of George Floyd's his dying words, "I can't breathe." I think Eric Garner spoke those words something like 11 times before he was killed by a white police officer. You had people like Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, Michael Brown, all murdered. Those are just some of the famous names. Of course, it's happening every day. But to you, and I asked this question of Nate at the very beginning, but does this feel like a watershed moment? Does this death of George Floyd feel different? Feel like it's going to change things?
My heart, my soul, my body, hope so, man. I really do hope so. But I will say this, something I've been continually saying is this is the most, with all the chaos that's going on, with all the looting that's going on by the looters, with all the protesting that's going on by the protesters, and everybody in between, with all the negative, this is the most support from Black, brown, white, red, blue, whatever skin color that I've ever seen. This is the most support for the cause that I have ever seen. So, yes, the country is divided right now, but there's a lot of unity going on as well. Like, we have there's a lot of unification that's going on with different skin colors, and it's a beautiful sight. It's a real beautiful sight. We harp on the negative a lot, but on a positive note, man, we're getting so much support. I think a lot of people misunderstand an angry Black man. See, I'm an angry Black man yet I still have the wherewithal to have a conversation with someone to understand their side and for them to understand my side. Um, and what they fail to realize that I could be an angry black man and I could still love my country. I could be an angry black man and um, I could still love the police. You know what I'm saying? I could be an angry black man. I can call out the police that are supposed to protect and serve me. You know, um, I could be an angry black man and want the police in my community to be one. You know, a lot of people are so simple minded where he's an angry black man, he's bitter, and and that's it. Or um, this white guy, he loves cops, he's for cops. Let's roll. We're for cops. No, man, you should be for justice. You can love cops and you can love rights for blacks and brown skins. I mean, you can call out this country and love it at the same time. You know, a lot of people are putting people in boxes, and because you're doing that, we don't get to have that dialogue. And when we don't have that dialogue, we're nothing, man. It's chaotic. We're dead because there's no understanding.
I don't want to keep it too much longer, Lamar, but
Okay.
I mean, when you speak about the cops there, and I mean, I've never experienced fear being stopped
hmm
by a police patrol. But is it something you've experienced? I mean, I know racial profiling is a thing that's clearly prevalent in America,
Sure.
but have you any personal experiences, examples? I'm sure you have, of incidents where you were treated differently because you were a black person.
Of course. You know, I've been pulled over a few times. Never understood why. Never got a reason why. But my little brother just got pulled over. Um, hey, can want to search your vehicle? He said no. You can't search my vehicle. Um, Cops like whatever. We're going to search it. They call in the dogs. They search the vehicle. They rummage through all his things and then laugh and say, "Have a nice day." Now this is at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, um, in a small country road with no lights. You know, so my little brother was fearful for his life. You know, especially they didn't tell him why he was pulled over. They called in dogs, um, and then they said they didn't care if he said no. They couldn't search it. They're going to search it anyway. So at that point in my mind, I'm thinking, bro, they're going to plant something in my car and I'm going to jail. You know, um, my mom gets in touch with the I think it's St. Tammany Parish. My mom gets in touch with the police officers, um, the police station, and they don't have the stop on the record. Um, and usually when you dispatch dogs, you have to call that in. They don't have that on record either. So I could have been the one on TV mourning my brother, you know, calling for justice because that's just a setup, man. Like, come on, man. What do you mean it's not recorded? You know, what do you mean it's not on record? Like, what do you mean? Where were the body cams? I mean, and that's what, man, we need to hold police officers more accountable. Police stations, police chiefs. My dad is a police officer. So I am not anti-cop. I'm anti-justice.
Absolutely. Just to finish up, then, Lamar, I mean, I suppose to try and end on a positive note, as tough as that is, given recent events, but we had two Irish track and field athletes, international athletes, both black, both grew up in Ireland, on our show recently. I think we've lost you there, Lamar. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
You're still there. I mean, they spoke about. We were asking them, how we can do better, and they say communication and education are key.
hmm
What would you say to people generally, not just white people, but people who want to learn more, who want to educate themselves, people who are maybe taking part in Black Lives Matter
hmm
protests that never
hmm
did before? I mean, what's the solution, or what's the road to the solution in all of this?
I think the road to the solution is understanding and try walking in someone's shoes. I don't have the answers, but I know to get on that path, to get on that road, we have to understand. So we have to break down that wall of fear. And that's on both sides. Blacks have to break down that wall of fear with whites, and whites have to break down that wall of fear with blacks. And once we break down that wall, and you can have a conversation, just sit down, man. Just sit down and just talk. And I guarantee you, you will walk away more knowledgeable, more understanding of the other side. And once you understand, once you get why they're in pain, you know what they go through on a daily basis, then the next parts are easy, man. But first you have to tear down that wall of fear.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Lamar Louis, you've been great with your time. Thank you so much for joining us. And Nate Boyer was the guest beforehand. So thank you to you both, and
Thanks for having me.
stay safe.
Oh, thank you, man. Have a good one.